The 1955 NBA All-Star Game mostly brought together a new generation of NBA stars. The game took place at Madison Square Garden for the second straight year on Tuesday, January 13, 1953. The East was the home team, so they got to wear white again this year, so it ended up being a repeat of last year's designs. At this point, these six-star jerseys have been used 4 straight years. They've become a staple All-Star jersey. After 6 years of Lakers NBA dominance, we were finally free. The Lakers had been vanquished by Father Time. The Hawks got 1 All-Star cause they were racist and sucked. Every other team had 2 or 3 All-Stars. This season we had new contenders: the Pistons, the Celtics, and the eventual champions, the Syracuse Nationals. This is one of the 3 precious championships Sixers fans brag about, by the way. Just to repeat, the 76ers organization has 3 championships, and one of them is older than all of the Celtics rings. George Mikan had retired as the all-time leading scorer in All-Star Game points and rebounds. Bob Cousy was the leader in assists. Almost every record is basically owned by the Four-Timers Club. The Four-Timers are the All-Stars who had been to every All-Star Game that ever been to this point. In 1954, the most anyone had scored in an All-Star Game was 26. The most rebounds was 18. The most assists was 13. Harry the Horse Gallatin had set the rebound record just the previous year, and Jim Pollard tied George Mikan for the third-place record of 23 points in a single game. The East had extended their 2-1 series lead to 3-1, and now have a 1-game winning streak and the reigning All-Star MVP. The West have just lost the best player in the world, so they're likely going to be horrible. I'm no expert, but if I was there at the time, I'd probably be expecting the West to lose pretty convincingly. PER, Player Efficiency Rating, is a statistical measure created by John Hollinger to summarize a player's overall statistical performance in a single number. The average PER is set to 15.0 every season, so if anyone's over 15, they're better than average. As you can see by the 5-year PER graph, the East hold basically a monopoly on PER monsters now. Except for this one rookie here. The statistical best player in the world is Neil Johnston on the Philadelphia Warriors, but the Warriors suck, so he's an All-Star reserve in the East. The rookie is Bob Pettit of the Hawks. Pettit is already at 20 points per game, good for 3rd in points and 2nd in PER. He might be the 2nd best player in the league in his first season. Yikes! Dolph Chase took spot number 3. He's measurably the only two-way star in the league. This is the year he finally goes on to win a championship, and he was pivotal, so the stats might correlate. He is maybe the 3rd best player in the world in 1955. On this second graph, you can kinda see how Chase, Johnston, and Pettit are overall the most productive on the floor during this season. I give top spot for best player in the world in 1955 to Neil Johnston because his PER was the best, and so was his combined win shares. Combined win shares are the sum of offensive and defensive win shares. Offensive win shares highlight players who are not only high scorers but also efficient and impactful in their offensive role. Neil Johnston, 21 points on 8 shots per game, that is quite efficient. And despite not having a high defensive win share total, he is still 4th in defensive win shares. Best in the world? Larry Faust and Ed Macauley are also offensive win share darlings. Defensive win share identifies players who excel in defensive roles even if their offensive stats are not as prominent. This year's leader is Dolph Chase, followed by a gap. Neil Johnston leads the league in points. Number 2 was Eastern Reserve Paul Harrison. Number 3 was Western Reserve Bob Pettit. So none of the top 3 scorers in the league was starting in the All-Star Game. Arnie Risen of the Rochester Royals was selected as an All-Star with a good, dominant season again, but this year he was injured. Ray Felix, who was an ex-All-Star, was still quite good and was an All-Star snub. As was Chuck Scher, who improved every year of his career, but had yet to be named an All-Star. This year's East All-Stars had an average All-Star selections of 3.8. There was 0 new All-Stars in the East. First up in the East, starting with Harry the Horse Gallatin. One of the five-timers in 1955, he had a career high in free throw percentage. This season he managed to be number 2 in rebounds, and he was starting in the All-Star game. Bob Cousy of the East was also a five-timer in 1955. Another productive year, he slightly increased production as a 26-year-old now. This season he had his career high and field goal percentage. Actually, the Houdini of the hardwood was 4th in scoring at 20 points per game, and still managed to be number 2 in assists as well. Dolph Chase was starting once again. He finally won his championship this year. He was 3rd in PER, 1st in rebounds, 1st in defensive win shares, and the only reason he's a 4-timer instead of a 5-timer is because he actually missed 1 year due to injury. 1955 5-timer Ed Macauley had a dip in production, where he was still a starter, but he was no longer a superstar for the first time in his career. Paul Seymour was starting shooting guard for the Syracuse Nationals on the championship team. This was his 3rd and last All-Star appearance, luckily culminating in this championship. He was also an All-NBA team member this season. This season was Paul Seymour's career high in points, rebounds, and assists. D. McGuire of the Knicks rebounded with another improvement year at 29 years old to earn his 4th All-Star selection. This season, Tricky Dicky had a career-high 8 assists per game. Paul Arizin is actually a returning name if you recall him from the first 2 All-Star games. He actually has the current All-Star game all-time leading single-game record at 26 points. He's returned from 2 years of military service, and he's come back quite a lot worse than his first 2 seasons, but he's still an all-star. I'd probably declare him an honorary member of the Five-Timers Club because he probably would be if he'd played. This season he led the NBA in minutes played, was 2nd in scoring, and had a career-high 3 assists per game. Bill Sharman was an all-star again this year. Another solid season, he again for the 3rd year in a row led the league in free throw percentage at almost 90% this year on high volume. Carl Braun, the baby face of the Knicks, had another all-star season this year. And yeah, Neil Johnson was a reserve. Led the league in points, and he'd go on to, this season, lead the league in rebounds as well. The West had 4 new all-stars this year. The Hawks only had 1 because they were racist and bad. The Royals got 2, the Lakers got 3, and the Pistons also got 3. Handy Andy Phillip, the first ever All-Star to go from the East All-Star team to the West All-Star team, had his final All-Star season this year, with a good quality season, whereas the starting point guard went to the NBA Finals after years of mediocrity on the Pistons. Phillip played 3 more seasons, but that was his last All-Star appearance. Sadly, another one of the Five-Timers Club had fallen. Jim Pollard was once again an All-Star. This season, the Kangaroo Kid, the man with the long gray beard, Amos Alonso Pollard, had his last All-Star season to close off his career. 5 championships for the Lakers in 7 seasons. Bobby Wanzer, the now 33-year-old of the Rochester Royals, turned in another quality All-Star season with similar production to his other All-Star seasons. At this point he was more of a veteran, still an All-Star though. Larry Faust is improved this season. He actually led the league in field goal percentage while putting up better numbers than his previous 4 All-Star seasons. This year he started to bring the ball up, and he's now started to become a dominant type. He's also technically a member of the Five-Timers Club who missed only 1 year due to injury. This jump is also why the Pistons go from trash to finals contenders so quickly. George Yardley was on the Pistons. Last year he was not really a major factor with barely any time on the team. However, in the time he did play he managed to put up respectable numbers that season. This year his usage has gone up and all he's had to do is maintain that efficiency, and as a result he's an all-star with 17 points per game. My pick for most improved. At 6'5", he's a good-sized forward in the 50s. Bob Pettit is a rookie, but he's already a superstar in my eyes. 2nd in PR, 3rd in points per game, right up there for rebounding too. He's really good on the defensive end as well. He's just a solid player. But he plays for the Hawks and I don't like the Hawks. His name is Robert Ely Pettit Jr., which is kind of wild. But if you ignore that, he did turn in a solid rookie season. Four-time All-Star Vern Mikkelsen has come back to the All-Star game after a bounce-back season. This year Mikan left the Lakers, so he's had to bump up his usage. The Great Dane is his nickname, which is funny because he actually does kinda look like a Great Dane. He had a solid season where he was 7th in scoring and one of the most impactful players on the offensive end at 42% field goal percentage. Thanks to this, he's part of the reason why the Lakers are still over 500 even though the best player is gone. Slater Martin is another reason why. He has also had a bounce-back season now that Mikan was gone. Now with 3-time All-Star appearances, he bumped up his play, took more shots, hit more assists and rebounds than last year. He's 5'10", so 3 All-Star appearances is very good. This was his career high in points for a career. Frank Selvey was the poor guy who was a superstar all by himself with the space to take all the shots over in Baltimore, but sadly, now the Bullets have folded. He averaged 22, 7 and 3 in his first 11 games. After the Bullets folded, he found himself on the Hawks where he had less shots and less opportunities with the ball in his hand. Yet he managed to turn in an All-Star season as a Hawks rookie, good for 5th in scoring. His teammate Bob Pettit is also a rookie All-Star, making this one of the most unique teams ever. This season was his career high in points, rebounds and minutes. Jack Coleman of the Rochester Royals is now an All-Star. He's been on the Royals since the 1951 championship, but since former 4-time All-Star Bob Davies has taken on a reduced role at 35 years old, he's had an increased role and increased usage has led to bump in production, and now he is an All-Star too. This season he averaged a career high in field goal percentage and in points. The 1955 All-Star game ended in a decisive East victory. Despite how close the score looks, it wasn't that close. The East barely let the West have any room to hit shots. They missed a whole bunch of shots. It was terrible. Bill Sharman was MVP for 15 points, 4 rebounds and 2 assists. He managed to score 10 of his 15 points in the fourth quarter in a dagger-like fashion, and that's why he won MVP. Now the East had a 4-1 record over the West. For fans of the East like myself, this is one of my favorite periods in time. On the West side, the Lakers, Mikkelsen, Martin and Pollard gave as much as they could, but it was just too much. The East had Harry the Horse putting in 13, 14 and 3. Cousy dropped 20, 9 and 5. Chase had 15, 13 and 1, and don't even forget about MVP Sharman. Was a masterpiece of a game for the East. Bob Cousy's game-high 20 points didn't break any records, but his 9 rebounds and 5 assists made him the first player to land on all 3 leaderboards in a single game, which is pretty cool, I guess. Harry the Horse and Chase and Cousy of the East dominated Cease on the boards. 1955 is technically also the first year that none of the single-game records were broken. George Mikan, despite being retired, managed to keep his spot at the very top of the points all-time leaderboard, but Chase overtook him for number 1 in rebounds all-time by 1 rebound today. Cousy moved to number 1 in assists while Andy Phillip moved to number 2. There's footage of the 1955 game, so if you really want to watch it, it's on YouTube. You can watch it right now, and you should be able to know all the players. At the moment, that's basically all you need to know about the 1955 All-Stars and the All-Star game. I rate this game a C+. More videos are coming in the future on the channel. All-Star games, the playoffs, full-on season reviews. They're all on the way. Please follow Frontiers Basketball and share this to not be a casual.